President Cyril Ramaphosa has departed for a working visit to the United States for meeting with the U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. The meeting is expected to set the stage for a series of bilateral trade agreements in various sectors, including agriculture, energy and transport. This comes after mounting tension over South Africa's policy choices and the U.S.'s hardline response, including the controversial offer of a refugee status to Afrikaners. This is following false claims of racial persecution by right-wing groups. For more on this, let's now have this chat with the senior researcher at the Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Oscar van Heerden. Prof, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. So the visit is actually happening, so it seems that that meeting will be happening on Wednesday. But what should we read into the assertion that has been made by the South African government as well, that this meeting was actually requested by the US President Donald Trump, considering as well that since January we've been told that there are attempts to meet with the Trump administration, but those had been futile?
Yes, no, I think it is actually, the explanation for me is plausible, because the reality is that since the furore with Ambassador Rasool, the South African government, DIRCO, and the presidency has been trying to make contact with the United States administration, with the Trump administration, but to no avail. We know, for example, that not only were they not interested in meeting with the South African government, they agreed to meet with conservative right-wing groups such as AfriForum, Solidarity, and so forth, and also a meeting with the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance. So I'm not surprised that the phone call came from the White House, and also the timing. The timing suggests to me that that call definitely, the invite definitely came from the White House, because there was a reason, I suspect, why the refugees, the so-called refugees, were expedited and why they had to land in the United States, because it's all part of the choreographed meeting that's going to take place. In terms of your quiz, Aldred, this morning, Obviously the answer is that President Ramaphosa must deal with all of the above. One would hope that he is going to be able to obviously defend our sovereignty, but at the same time, he needs to walk away with a trade deal, preferably, and he also needs to make it clear that these falsehoods and untruths and lies about white genocide and farm killings and land grabs, and so he's got a monumental task ahead of him.
He's got a monumental task ahead of him, but we also know that Donald Trump loves playing to the gallery and sometimes works in his favor and sometimes not. But the composure of the president, if there is going to be such a meeting that was as tense as the meeting that we saw with Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine, if you have that media opportunity that would take place, what is it that we should be looking for?
Yeah, the South Africans, we are told, the South African delegation asked for an in-camera conversation. In other words, they wouldn't want the media to be there. But, knowing Donald Trump, and as I say, this is a whole choreographed, staged situation. The cameras are going to be there. There won't be enough time given to the president to explain at length why these things are lies, why there's need for a trade agreement. So I do think that I do hope that President Ramaphosa has got a strategy, whether it is touching the knee, touching the shoulder of the president, looking straight at the cameras and say, but it's not true, and so on and so forth. Do that kind of preparations, because dispelling the lies is easy. As you said in your insert, we see an ongoing genocide taking place in Gaza. We see, because of technology and smartphones and social media, the visuals of that persecution, displacement, killing of babies, killing of women, bombing of Gaza. None of these images can be produced in terms of South Africa. We all know it. The whole world knows it. And so your reporter earlier is correct. We must then ask the question, then, if we all know it's lies, what is the real agenda of Donald Trump? And I think we are going to see it on Wednesday. I don't think it's going to. In terms of Groenewald's statement that it's premature, when the invitation came, there is no way that President Ramaphosa could have said no, because relations are at such a terrible low. They had to accept the invitation. And I do hope he's calling it a working visit. I do hope that once the 30 minutes in front of the cameras have played out, whether in a negative way, in a Zelensky way, in an embarrassing way, that the president will then take time, at least a day or two, to travel around the United States, to meet with Congress, to meet with the Black Caucus, to talk to Americans directly, far away from the office of the West Wing, to explain South Africa's position and why it is important that we dispel these lies, but also why there's a need for trade agreements and why we must stay in AGOA. This is uppermost important. There's more than 600 United States companies that are operating in South Africa, and they themselves will be able to report back and say, but there is no such white genocide and persecutions and so forth. So it's a difficult task ahead, but I think Trump has choreographed this, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, and I know that the focus has been on the Afrikaners, but if we read some of the statements that have come from the US President Donald Trump, and even on his social media platform, Truth Social, is that the issue around geopolitics also plays quite a crucial role in how the United States under the current executive and the previous executive actually also views South Africa when it comes to the Israeli case. Do you think that that's a matter that the US president is going to put on the table and try to pressurize South Africa to pull out of the ICJ case?
Absolutely. Absolutely, no doubt. It's a childish attempt to say that the country that took Israel to the ICJ for the crime of genocide is committing genocide themselves. This is the narrative that South Africa cannot be this moral authority when they themselves are having genocide against a certain section of the population. And unfortunately, we have, and it's very unfortunate, that we have organizations and NGOs and so on in South Africa that feeds that narrative for their own political ends. So this is the idea. South Africa is a genocidal country, and for the first time in its 30 years of democracy, they are now refugees that have sought refuge somewhere else because they are being persecuted, killed, maimed, and so forth. So that's the one aspect. The other aspect, Aldred, is that geopolitically, South Africa is part of the BRICS formation. It is the junior partner of BRICS. And we know, even though the United States and the European Union wants to downplay the importance of the BRICS formation, they see it as a threat. They see the issue of de-dollarization as a threat. They see the fact that the United States has weaponized the dollar and weaponized trade, and BRICS responding to that. They need to deal with this formation, with this alliance, and what better way to do it but to target the weakest and the smallest partner within the alliance and make an example of them. So there's a lot of things at play here. I wish our president all the best. I hope he can outmaneuver Trump and his shenanigans, but I suspect it's going to be a spectacle.
Well, those negotiation skills are going to be quite important for this meeting as well. But in conclusion, we have the G20 summit, leader summit, that will be taking place later in the year. And although there has been the communication of a almost boycotting of the G20, we know with the various meetings that have been taking place that the US has actually been represented. Do you think that the president will be able to convince Donald Trump to come to South Africa for the G20 Leaders Summit, considering that the US will be taking over the presidency, and perhaps witness for himself, which I doubt that he thinks that there's a genocide happening in South Africa, that there is actually no genocide?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think so. I don't think that Ramaphosa is going to be able to convince him. He's made it very clear why they are boycotting supposedly the G20, because there are nasty things happening. There are terrible things happening over there, and so on, killing of white farmers and so forth. All lies, and all premised on the fact that he doesn't want to come to South Africa. I think we must stop harping on about the fact that the US must be here. If they don't want to come and take over the baton, as you know, the next presidency of the G20 is America. And if they don't want to come and take the baton from Ramaphosa,